Hello, I'm Claire and this is my instructional strategies video for 3250 online. Please excuse my froggy voice, I'm having trouble shaking a cold. With that said, let's get started on the video. I've chosen to present on the topic of problem-based learning. It's a learning strategy I find really interesting. I think it has a lot of use. Let's start by talking about what problem-based learning is. It's a form of student-centered learning in which students are given open-ended problems without a lot of definition or structure. And they work in collaborative groups to solve these problems. Now, when I say open-ended problems, I mean something like a case study, an engineering challenge, a guided design problem, or anything that's complex that really opens up for a lot of possibilities for solutions. In this sort of learning, teachers serve more as facilitators than lecturers. They're there to help the students learn, but not to directly impart the information. Next, let's talk about how problem-based learning works best. To start, students need to possess problem-solving skills. This is absolutely something they need to come into this exercise with. They need to focus on their learning and on where they're going with the project. This isn't the time for them to learn how to research, how to brainstorm, anything like that. Next, groups should be small so that each student has a voice and a major part in the work. This exercise is better for higher level classes, as it's a bit more about analysis than it is about building a framework of knowledge. You also need few enough groups that the teacher can be walking around the class and checking in on all of them. Students need to feel like they can have help and guidance when they need it, and the teacher needs to be able to have enough time and resources to respond to all the students. As well, the students need ample access to resources so they can do their research. This can be websites, it can be a library, it can be a panel of experts they can consult, it can be anything as long as they can do research and learn to accomplish these tasks. Let's talk about some of the advantages to this strategy. For one thing, it improves the retention of information. Applied knowledge is a lot more easily retained in long-term memory than is knowledge that's sort of temporarily crammed into your short-term memory. As well, students learn knowledge that is applicable to the workplace. They can really customize their projects to be quite relevant to their occupations and skills. Also, this strategy is well suited to adult learner characteristics. We have learned lots of times in this course that adult learners are very self-directed and pragmatic, so a strategy that lets them really choose their own directions and make practical solutions to problems is fantastic. As well, problem-based learning uses both critical and creative thinking skills, as students define the boundaries of a problem, brainstorm, craft, and test solutions. It really uses a lot of parts of their brains and many, many skills at once. However, it also has some limitations. For one thing, it can be frustrating for students who lack problem-solving skills. As we've said before, that's why it's vitally important to make sure that students have problem-solving skills already. It can also be difficult for teachers to keep track of all groups. This might be time to have an extra teacher in the class, or invite people in from the community that are experts in the field you're teaching, or just make sure that you have a manageable class size if this is a strategy you're using as a teacher. As well, there's some research that cognitive overload can happen when this strategy is being employed. Jay Sweller did some research on this topic and felt that students are not able to handle so much new information at once. In short, the pressure of completing the project does not allow them to absorb information at their own pace. However, I would add to this that students don't really get to absorb information at their own pace in most classrooms, so I think this can be a fairly common problem in education, and not one that's necessarily specific to this strategy. Let's talk a bit about the best practices for using problem-based learning. For one thing, the instructors should choose the groups. This helps make sure that everyone in the class gets comfortable with everyone else, and you can have a good mixture of people working together. People don't just gravitate to their friends that way, and the instructor can mix up different abilities, skills, level of comfort speaking English, and so on and so forth. It's important to ensure that feedback is provided when using this strategy. For example, I'm a woodworking teacher, so I would probably give students an assignment that would have something to do with designing a piece of furniture. A way to do feedback would be the students could present their furniture design to the class, and we could all do a critique of it based on the aesthetic and practical components, saying, well, that's a lovely looking chair in the Art Nouveau style. However, I suspect it's going to fall apart the first time someone sits in it. Just do critiques like that. That would be one way to make sure the students get feedback and that their work isn't existing in a vacuum. As well, it's important to use small groups. The students need to feel as though they're really involved in this process, and they all need to have a large share, or it's not a very valuable exercise. Small groups ensure that that happens. Providing ample resources is important as well, as we've talked about previously. Students need to really have a lot of resources to draw on in such a complex strategy. They need to be able to do adequate research and have access to any information and ideas they need to come up with a successful solution. And for the instructor, a best practice is don't take up too much space. You can walk around the classroom, you can facilitate, but make sure that you're not taking over for the students. Let's talk a bit about the role for the educator in this strategy. I can't emphasize enough that this instructor in this strategy is a facilitator, not a lecturer. It is not your place to stand up at the front of the room and tell the students the right solution to this. With any luck, you've done the educational groundwork already, and the students are building on their existing knowledge to work together. You can certainly provide them with resources. I might provide, say, woodworking magazines, or furniture design books, or bring in pieces of furniture to the class. You can help provide inspiration that way, but make sure you're not lecturing to the students. Also, make sure you're helping the students just enough. Let them develop their own ideas, let them have a chance to try things out, let them have a limited amount of frustrations and failures, but make sure you're helping them as well. You don't want to do the project for them, but you also don't want them to get frustrated and burned out because you're not helping enough. The role for students in this strategy is mainly to take initiative. Students can get used to being fairly passive in school, but this is a time when they really have to take a leading role and work in a really proactive manner. This is also a chance for students to polish their group work skills. You can learn how to work better with other people and manage difficult situations together, which is an essential thing to learn for use in the workplace and really for the rest of life. Students also need to challenge themselves and grow. This is a difficult assignment, and if they can really try to cover some new ground with the problems and solutions they're working on, they'll get a lot more out of it. They also need to learn to apply knowledge. Sometimes when you learn things in a classroom, you end up with your knowledge being compartmentalized, and it's not too useful in a real-life situation. Once you start applying theories, you have a far better understanding of what's going on. It's a very valuable skill. Finally, let's talk quickly about the ethical and cultural and gender implications of this strategy. One thing it's important for teachers to do is to ensure that students' language skills are up to the task. For example, if you have a student that speaks English as a second language and isn't very good at oral communication, they're going to have a lot of trouble in a group work assignment like this. So that's something to keep in mind as a teacher. One great thing about this strategy in an ethical and cultural way is that it allows each student a voice and the ability to speak from their own experiences. As well, this collaborative project works really well with different inputs. So a diversity of viewpoints coming from a diverse class will really enrich the work that the students do. And that's my presentation on problem-based learning. I hope this has helped you learn a little bit about this strategy and gotten you inspired to use it in one of your own classes. Thank you.